Earth had always been a quiet, distant planet, unnoticed by the more powerful civilizations scattered across the galaxy. It was a place where life struggled, flourished, and sometimes perished. But in the vastness of space, Earth had always been hidden from the eyes of those who had the power to take it. That was until the Relians discovered it. They were a formidable alien species, known for their immense strength and cunning. They had conquered countless planets, each one more advanced than the last. They had destroyed empires, left galaxies in ruins, and yet, when they found Earth, something stirred deep within them. The planet seemed ordinary at first, with nothing special about it. But as their ships entered Earth's atmosphere, a strange feeling filled the air. The Relians, for the first time, felt a sense of unease, a warning they couldn't ignore. The Relians had sent their scouts to monitor Earth's radio waves, to understand the primitive species that lived on the surface. They had studied Earth's history, its wars, its many conflicts, but nothing had prepared them for what they encountered. As their ships touched down on Earth's soil, the first humans they encountered seemed helpless, unprepared. The Relians saw them as weak, fragile creatures, nothing more than prey. The invaders expected a swift conquest, a planet to add to their growing empire. However, their arrogance would soon become their downfall. The initial attack was swift. Cities were shattered. Buildings collapsed under the weight of alien technology. The Relians moved through Earth's cities like predators through a forest. The humans, stunned and confused, had no idea how to stop them. However, there was something the Relians had overlooked. They failed to see the strength buried deep within humanity. They had mistaken Earth's vulnerability for weakness. What they didn't understand was that Earth had produced creatures who had survived against the odds, who had fought against all forms of danger for thousands of years. Humans had faced predators in the wild, fought through the harshest environments, and adapted in ways the Relians never imagined. In the heart of New York City, a group of survivors huddled together in an abandoned building. They were not soldiers, not trained fighters, but they had something far more powerful: the ability to survive. As the Relian ships hovered overhead, scanning the ruins of the city, these humans were not hiding in fear. They were planning. They knew their world had changed forever, but they also knew they could not be defeated. They had fought against wild animals, harsh winters, and even starvation. What were aliens compared to the forces they had already survived? Meanwhile, across the ocean in London, similar scenes were unfolding. People who had once been doctors, teachers, and artists found themselves suddenly in a war they weren't prepared for. But when the aliens' forces began to close in, something inside them sparked. They fought with the instinct of animals, using the environment to their advantage. They knew the cities better than the Relians ever could. The humans began to strike back, small groups attacking Relian patrols with hit-and-run tactics, using old weapons, improvised explosives, and even their bare hands. Every success, no matter how small, seemed to fuel their resolve. It was clear now: Earth was not a planet of prey. The humans had become the predators. Back in the heart of the Relian fleet, the commanders began to notice something strange. The humans were not as easy to eliminate as they had thought. Their soldiers were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to reclaim their home. A message began to spread across the Relian ranks, something that made even the most battle-hardened warriors uneasy. Earth produces predators, not prey. This message wasn't about humans' ability to fight. It was about something deeper, something primal. The humans had tapped into something that the Relians had not accounted for, a hidden power buried within them. The Relians had underestimated Earth. They had seen it as nothing more than another world to conquer, another species to subdue. But the humans were far more than that. They had the ability to fight back, not just physically, but mentally. Humans had a way of adapting, of learning from their mistakes, and above all, they had an unwavering will to survive. They had survived the most dangerous creatures in their past: wolves, lions, bears. Now they were fighting against something even more dangerous: beings from another world. But it didn't matter. The humans had learned one important lesson through the ages: never back down. As the days passed, the Relians began to realize that this invasion was not going to be as easy as they had thought. They started losing ships, soldiers, and resources. Earth's terrain, once thought to be nothing more than a backdrop to the conflict, now became an advantage for the humans. They knew the forests, the mountains, the deserts, and the cities better than anyone. The Relians had the technology and firepower, but the humans had the land. And they had each other. The humans' ability to communicate, to organize, and to adapt was something the Relians had never faced before. Their enemies were not just fighting to defend their homes, they were fighting for survival itself. In the chaos of battle, a human general named Michael Reed emerged as a leader. He was not a man of great power or size, but his mind was sharp, and his instincts were sharper. He understood what the Relians did not. The key to victory was not in overpowering the enemy, but in wearing them down, exploiting their weaknesses. Reed rallied the remaining forces, creating a network of resistance groups that spread across the globe. His strategy was simple, yet effective. Use the environment against the invaders, lead them into traps, and strike when they least expected it. The Relians, who had once seen Earth as a simple conquest, were now on the defensive. Every move they made was countered with precision. As the battle raged on, the Relians realized that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. Earth had revealed a truth that no one had foreseen. Humanity was not some weak species to be wiped out with ease. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Relians had come to Earth expecting a quick conquest, but what they encountered instead was a predator, one that would never stop fighting until its last breath. The humans, despite all odds, had begun to turn the tide of war. The message was clear: Earth was not a planet of prey. It was a planet of predators. And as the Relians learned the hard way, never underestimate the power of Earth's creatures. The Relians had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. Cities once filled with the hum of daily life were now silent ruins. The skies, once clear, were filled with the dark shadows of alien ships that hovered ominously, searching for any remaining pockets of human resistance. The alien invaders had thought Earth would fall within days, a planet ripe for the taking, its inhabitants too weak to stand against such a powerful force. They were wrong. What the Relians didn't expect was that humans had something far more dangerous than advanced weaponry or superior technology. They had a will to survive that no alien force could break. Across the world, in small, hidden places far from the prying eyes of the Relians, the resistance was beginning to form. It started with whispers in the streets, word of mouth in the abandoned underground bunkers, and soon it grew into something much larger. People who had once been ordinary citizens, living quiet, peaceful lives, found themselves thrust into a war that they didn't ask for. But in the face of destruction, they had no choice but to fight. And they fought like never before. In the desolate ruins of what had once been a bustling city, a group of survivors huddled together. They were not soldiers, but they had learned the hard way how to fight. They understood the lay of the land, the terrain, the way the Relians moved, and most importantly, how they thought. Every day, more and more groups like these were coming together, banding together for a common cause, to push the invaders off their planet. In a small, crumbling building at the edge of what used to be Paris, a former schoolteacher named Claire stood before a room filled with men and women who had come from all corners of the earth. She wasn't a fighter by nature, but the war had forced her to adapt. Like so many others, she had lost everything: her home, her family, her life as she once knew it. But now she was the one leading a resistance cell, showing others how to fight, how to survive. It wasn't just about weapons or physical strength. It was about outsmarting the Relians, using their own overconfidence against them. "They think we're weak," Claire said, her voice steady and calm. "They think we're nothing, but they don't understand. Humans fight when they're cornered. We're not just survivors. We're predators. and we're going to make them regret ever landing here." Her words sent a ripple of energy through the room. Every person in that building knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew that they had something the Relians didn't: determination. They had the strength of a species that had fought through the ages, facing down every challenge the world had thrown at them. This time, the challenge came from the stars, and the humans were ready. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a former military strategist named Lieutenant, using guerrilla tactics and the environment to his advantage. He understood that the key to victory wasn't about matching strength with strength. It was about using what they had. Earth's terrain, its forests, mountains, and cities, became the perfect battleground. The Relians, with all their advanced technology, were slow and cumbersome in comparison. Harris set traps, ambushed patrols, and sabotaged the Relian war machines. Each victory, no matter how small, sent a wave of hope throughout the human resistance. But the resistance wasn't just about survival. It was about striking back, about proving that humans were not to be underestimated. They attacked Relian supply lines, stole weapons, and used the enemy's technology against them. With every successful mission, their confidence grew. The Relians, who had once viewed Earth as a simple conquest, were beginning to see the humans in a different light. They weren't just prey. They were a force to be reckoned with. In the dense forests of South America, another group of survivors had turned the jungle into their weapon. They used the trees for cover, setting traps that only a predator would understand. The Relians, unable to see what was coming, walked right into the snare. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a war of attrition. The Relians had thought they could wipe out the human race in a matter of days, but with each passing week, they realized that the humans weren't going down without a fight. Back in the heart of the Relian fleet, the alien commanders began to grow frustrated. Their once sophisticated invasion plans were falling apart. The humans were too unpredictable, too resilient. They didn't behave like prey. They fought back like predators, using every resource available to them. The Relians had technology, but they lacked the one thing humans had: adaptability. They had never faced an enemy that could change tactics so quickly, so fiercely. They had never faced a species that could turn their weaknesses into strength. The Relians began to tighten their grip on Earth, but it was no longer as easy as it once seemed. Every day, more and more human groups rose up, challenging their dominance. What had started as small, scattered resistance efforts now grew into something much larger, an organized rebellion that was beginning to strike fear into the hearts of the Relians. The humans were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for their freedom, for their planet, for their future. And then, a new development sent shockwaves through the Relian ranks. They discovered that Earth's human population was not as small as they had believed. While the Relians had initially thought of humanity as a small, scattered group of primitive creatures, they now realized that Earth's population was vast, far greater than they had accounted for. Every hidden resistance cell was like a drop in a growing ocean. The number of people willing to fight back was swelling, and the Relians began to panic. They had underestimated the sheer determination of Earth's inhabitants. As the war raged on, a sense of unity began to spread among the human resistance. It wasn't just about individuals anymore. It was about the collective will to fight. From the smallest villages to the biggest cities, humans were coming together to challenge the alien invaders. The resistance grew bolder. They attacked with precision, leaving the Relians scrambling to respond. Every strike against the invaders made it clear: Earth was not there to conquer. It was their home, and no one was going to take it from them. Back in New York, the largest remaining human city, the resistance launched one of the most daring attacks yet. They stormed a Relian supply depot, catching the invaders completely off guard. It was a turning point in the war. The humans had struck a major blow, and the Relians began to realize that their days of easy conquest were over. They had awakened something in humanity, something that would not be silenced, something that would not be defeated. Earth had become a planet of predators, not prey. And the Relians, for the first time, were the ones who were hunted. The world had changed forever. The Relians, a vast and technologically advanced alien empire, had come to Earth with the belief that humanity was nothing more than a weak species, easily conquered and subjugated. They thought the Earthlings would bow down to their superior might. They were wrong. What the Relians didn't understand was that humanity had something that made them unpredictable, a deep, unshakable will to survive. The alien invaders had learned, too late, that humans were not just prey. They were predators, capable of unleashing untold fury when pushed to the edge. For months, the Relians had imposed their control over the planet, crushing resistance groups one by one. They had underestimated the humans' ability to adapt and fight back. Victor had once been an ordinary man. He had lived a quiet life, far removed from the war that had been tearing the world apart. But when the Relians invaded, everything changed. His home was destroyed, his family taken, and his life as he knew it was shattered. In the face of such devastation, he did what humans do best. He survived. But Victor's survival wasn't just about hiding from the enemy. It was about vengeance. And vengeance for Victor meant becoming something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Victor's transformation had begun long before the Relians had arrived. As a former Special Forces operative, he had trained his mind and body for the impossible. When the war started, he didn't just retreat into the shadows like so many others. He adapted. He learned. He became a force that even the Relians began to fear. He fought with the cunning of a predator, striking from the shadows, using their own technology against them. And with every victory, Victor's legend grew. The Relians, initially confident in their superior technology, began to grow increasingly wary of this mysterious human. His attacks were unlike anything they had expected. He didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like a hunter. Every move he made was deliberate, calculated. He studied the Relians, learned their weaknesses, and exploited them. Every strike was a warning. Humanity would not go down without a fight. The Relians had expected the humans to break under the pressure, but they hadn't anticipated someone like Victor. He was unlike any human they had encountered. He didn't rely on brute force or heavy artillery. He relied on his mind, his instincts, and his ability to adapt. His skills as a Special Forces operative were now combined with the raw fury of a man who had lost everything. Victor had become the predator the Relians never saw coming. As Victor's resistance group grew, more and more humans joined his cause. They saw him as a symbol of hope, a beacon in the darkness. They didn't just follow him because of his military expertise. They followed him because they believed in what he stood for: survival, revenge, and the fight for their planet. They had seen what the Relians could do to their world, and they knew they could never stop fighting. Not as long as Victor led them. The Relians had started to take notice of Victor, but they didn't fully understand the threat he posed. At first, they sent small squads to deal with him, thinking they could eliminate him like any other insurgent. But Victor was no ordinary man, and every time they sent a force to capture or kill him, they failed. The alien invaders were frustrated. They had taken entire planets before, but this one man, this human, was somehow defying them. The more they tried to eliminate him, the more powerful he became. He wasn't just a symbol anymore. He was the embodiment of humanity's rage, their unwillingness to be conquered. One fateful night, the Relians decided to make a bold move. They sent their most elite squadron, an entire battalion of heavily armed soldiers, to hunt down Victor once and for all. It was a mission they thought was certain to succeed. They were wrong. Victor had anticipated their every move, and he had set a trap. The Relian battalion, equipped with the best weapons and armor, marched confidently into the heart of the human resistance's territory. They were met with silence at first, and then the sound of footsteps in the darkness. A shadow flickered in the distance. It was too late for the Relians to react. Victor and his team struck with the speed and precision of predators hunting their prey. The aliens were outmatched in the darkness, and within minutes, the battalion was in disarray. The Relians' advanced technology couldn't protect them from the human strategy and ingenuity. Victor moved like a ghost, never seen until it was too late. By the time the battle was over, the Relian squadron had been decimated. Not a single member of the elite force had survived. It was a devastating blow to the invaders, and the humans knew that this victory was just the beginning. Victor had proven something crucial. Humanity was not just surviving the invasion. They were fighting back. They were hunting their hunters. The news of the victory spread like wildfire. Across the world, the human resistance grew stronger. People who had once been too afraid to fight now found themselves inspired by the relentless spirit of Victor Hale. He had shown them that there was no such thing as a lost cause, no such thing as an insurmountable enemy. The Relians were strong, yes, but they were not invincible, and they had underestimated the strength of humanity's will. But the Relians weren't about to give up. The defeat of their elite battalion sent shockwaves through their ranks, but it also sparked a new level of determination. They knew that the war was far from over. The humans had shown their claws, but the Relians were still the most powerful force in the galaxy. They would crush the resistance and take Earth, but they had no idea just how dangerous it was to provoke a predator. Victor Hale was no longer just a man. He had become a symbol, a living embodiment of humanity's survival instinct. And as long as he walked the Earth, the Relians would never truly be safe. Every time they underestimated him, every time they thought they had him cornered, he would strike again. The predator had been unleashed, and the hunt had only just begun. The world was drowning under the weight of an alien invasion. The Relians, a technologically advanced race, had swept across Earth with unstoppable force. Cities had fallen, governments were shattered, and human resistance groups had been pushed to the brink of extinction. The Relians had never expected humanity to put up a fight. They had always seen Earth as a planet of weaklings, a species far beneath them. But as the war raged on, the Relians began to realize one crucial mistake they had made. They had underestimated humans. The turning point of the war came not from an army of soldiers or advanced weaponry, but from a single, seemingly ordinary man, Eli Carter. Eli had never been a soldier. He had lived a simple life, far removed from the chaos that was consuming the world. A mechanic by trade, Eli spent his days repairing engines and machines, his mind always focused on the small, intricate details of the world around him. But when the Relians arrived, his world was shattered. He watched as his friends and family were taken, his town destroyed, and everything he knew turned into dust. But in the wake of the destruction, something within him shifted. Where others saw despair, Eli saw an opportunity. The Relians had underestimated the power of the human spirit, and Eli was about to show them just how wrong they were. As the Relians tightened their grip on the planet, Eli quietly began to work. He had no formal training in warfare, but he understood machines. He understood how things work, how to take something broken and make it whole again. The world around him was full of destroyed alien technology, left behind after Relian battles. Eli saw potential in these scraps. While others had cowered in fear or fought with what little they had, Eli began to reverse engineer the alien technology, learning their systems and finding ways to exploit their weaknesses. It was a slow process. Eli worked in the shadows, avoiding the Relian patrols that roamed the cities. But with each passing day, he learned more. He started small, using alien energy sources to power old human machines. Then he began to upgrade the weapons that had once been used by the Relians themselves. Soon, he had constructed a small, yet powerful arsenal of human-made weapons that were far superior to anything the Relians had expected. Eli wasn't just fighting back. He was turning the tide. But Eli wasn't alone in his efforts. Word spread about the man who had begun to reverse the tide of the war, and soon, other survivors joined him. They came from every corner of the world. Soldiers who had lost their comrades, scientists who had lost their families, ordinary citizens who were tired of running. Together, they formed a small but determined resistance force. Eli became their leader, not because of his strength or military prowess, but because of his ability to think beyond the ordinary. He was a man who saw patterns where others saw chaos, and as the days passed, his ragtag group became more and more formidable. The Relians, however, were not easily swayed. Their forces, vast and well-equipped, seemed insurmountable. But they had no idea what they were up against. Eli's resistance grew stronger, slowly but surely, and with every small victory, the humans began to believe they could win. The Relians, for the first time, began to feel the weight of the resistance on their shoulders. They had thought Earth would be an easy conquest, but the humans had begun to turn the tide. The first major blow came when Eli and his team launched a daring attack on a Relian supply ship. The mission was almost suicidal, but Eli had planned every detail. With the weapons he had developed, the humans were able to infiltrate the heavily guarded ship and destroy the Relian supply lines. It was a blow to the heart of their operations, and the Relians were caught off guard. The humans had managed to strike where it hurt most, and the Relians' confidence began to crack. The Relians responded with overwhelming force, sending an entire fleet of warships to wipe out Eli's resistance and restore their control over Earth. But Eli wasn't about to back down. With his newfound allies, he set a plan into motion. The humans were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were ready to face the Relians head-on. Eli had developed a weapon unlike any the aliens had seen before, an electromagnetic pulse device capable of disabling Relian technology. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. The night of the battle, the air was thick with tension. Eli's resistance group had prepared for months. They had gathered supplies, perfected their strategies, and fortified their positions. As the Relian fleet descended upon Earth, it was clear they had no idea what they were walking into. Eli's pulse device was hidden deep within the human base, surrounded by layers of defenses. It was the heart of their plan, and it would either be their salvation or their doom. As the Relians launched their attack, Eli and his team launched their own assault. The battle raged on for hours, both sides fighting with everything they had. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing the full wrath of the Relian Empire. But Eli's mind was always 2 steps ahead. He directed his team with precision, using the alien technology they had reverse-engineered to disable Relian weapons and communication systems. The Relians were confused, their ranks falling into chaos. They didn't understand how the humans were able to fight back so effectively. Finally, the moment came. Eli and his team activated the pulse device. A wave of electromagnetic energy surged through the battlefield, disabling every Relian ship and weapon in range. The invaders were helpless. The humans had turned the tide in a single strike. The Relians had lost control. But the battle wasn't over yet. The Relians, humiliated and furious, attempted to regroup, but the damage had been done. The humans had discovered their greatest weakness, and with it, they had shown the galaxy that Earth was not a planet to be taken lightly. The Relians had come to conquer, but instead, they had unleashed a force they couldn't control. The resistance, under Eli's leadership, had turned the tide of the war, and the humans now knew they were capable of more than survival. They were capable of victory. The war wasn't over, but the victory marked the beginning of a new chapter in Earth's history. The Relians had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they would pay the price. Eli and his team had turned the tide, proving to the universe that humans were not to be taken lightly. With every victory, the resistance grew stronger. The Relians had come to conquer, but the humans had shown them that Earth produced warriors, not prey. And as long as Eli and his team were alive, the fight would continue. The Earth was a planet on the brink of extinction. Once teeming with life, it had become a dying world, battered by years of war. The skies, once clear and full of promise, were now shrouded in an endless haze. Cities lay in ruins, their towering buildings reduced to rubble. The alien invaders, the Orcs, had come from beyond the stars, their advanced technology and ruthless tactics overwhelming the world's armies in a matter of months. The Audris had no interest in peace or diplomacy. They had come to strip Earth of its resources and leave it in ruins. Humanity, caught off guard and unprepared, had been forced into hiding. The last remaining survivors lived in the shadows, hoping for a miracle. But there was a glimmer of hope in the darkness, a spark that had ignited in the hearts of those who refused to accept their fate. A group of survivors, led by a woman named Clara Morgan, had begun to fight back. Clara was a former scientist, a genius in the field of energy weapons. When the invasion began, she was just one of many scientists working to advance human technology. But as the Audris attacked, she lost everything: her home, her family, her colleagues. She watched as the world she loved was torn apart. But instead of giving in to despair, Clara turned her grief into determination. She refused to let the Audris take everything from her. Clara and a small group of survivors took refuge in an underground bunker, hidden deep within the mountains. For years, they studied the alien technology left behind by the Audris, learning how their weapons worked, how their ships operated, and most importantly, how they could fight back. Clara became obsessed with one particular technology, an alien energy source that could power unimaginable weapons. It was dangerous and unstable, but Clara was certain that it was the key to humanity's survival. She spent sleepless nights working on a way to harness its power, determined to turn the tide of the war. Meanwhile, the Audris were not idle. They had established a command center in the heart of what was once the United States, their technology quickly transforming the area into a high-tech fortress. They believed that Earth was theirs for the taking, that humanity had been crushed and was no longer a threat. They were wrong. As Clara and her team worked tirelessly in secret, they were not alone. Resistance groups, scattered across the globe, had begun to form. They, too, had learned to adapt, learning from the mistakes of the past. They struck at the Audris wherever they could, sabotaging their operations and weakening their grip on the planet. Each small victory, though minor, gave hope to the people still fighting for Earth. The day came when Clara's team completed their weapon. It was unlike anything the Audris had ever seen. A massive energy cannon capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single shot. But Clara knew that they could not launch it without a plan. The Audris had a powerful defense system that would quickly detect any attack. To succeed, they needed to catch the invaders off guard. Clara had a plan, one that required the help of the human resistance groups scattered across the world. With the weapon ready, Clara sent out a message. It was simple, but it carried a weight of hope that had been absent for years. Join us. This is our chance to take back our planet. The message spread like wildfire, reaching resistance groups in every corner of the Earth. The time had come. The battle for Earth's future would be fought in one final, all-out assault. The world's remaining fighters gathered, preparing for the most dangerous mission of their lives. Clara and her team worked quickly, coordinating with the resistance groups to launch a simultaneous attack on the Audris command center. The plan was to strike at the heart of their operation, crippling their leadership and weakening their control over the planet. It was a risky move. If they failed, humanity would be lost forever. But Clara had seen the spark of hope in the eyes of the people who had joined her. She knew that this was their last chance. As the forces assembled, Clara stood at the front, ready to lead them into battle. The resistance fighters were a diverse group, made up of soldiers, scientists, civilians, and children. They all shared one thing in common: a deep desire to reclaim their home, to take back their world from the Audris. They were fighting not just for survival, but for a future. The assault began at dawn. The resistance forces launched their attack on the Audris outer defenses, fighting their way through heavily fortified positions. The Audris, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, struggled to respond. Clara and her team, equipped with the newly developed energy weapons, cut a path through the enemy forces, their weapons tearing through the Audris shields with terrifying ease. The Audris commanders, desperate to maintain control, scrambled to launch counterattacks, but their communications were being jammed by the resistance. They were in disarray. The Orcs retaliated, sending their elite warriors into the fray. But the resistance, fueled by the will to survive, fought back with unmatched determination. Clara, leading the charge, pushed forward, determined to reach the heart of the Orcs stronghold. Every step they took brought them closer to their goal, but the Orcs were relentless. The battle raged on, with casualties mounting on both sides. But Clara's resolve never wavered. The weapon was their last hope, and they were not going to fail. Finally, after hours of fierce fighting, Clara and her team reached the heart of the Orcs command center. There, in the midst of the chaos, Clara activated the energy cannon. The massive weapon hummed with power as it charged up, its core glowing brightly. With a final, determined push, Clara fired the weapon. The blast was catastrophic. The Orcs command center was obliterated in a flash of light, the shockwave tearing through their defenses and sending the remaining invaders into retreat. The tide had turned. The Orcs, reeling from the loss of their command center and leadership, began to fall back. The resistance had dealt a devastating blow, and it was clear that their reign on Earth was coming to an end. Clara and her team had succeeded, but the cost was great. The world was still scared by the invasion, and the fight had taken a toll on every survivor. But for the first time in years, there was hope. The Orcs had been defeated, and humanity was free. As the sun rose over the battered Earth, Clara stood at the front of the resistance forces, looking out at the world they had saved. It was not the same world it had once been, but it was their world. And with every victory, every small triumph, they would rebuild. The Orcs had thought they could break humanity, but they had underestimated Earth. Clara knew that this was only the beginning of a new era for the planet. A new dawn had come for Earth, and the humans who had once been on the brink of extinction had now proven that they were not to be underestimated. Earth was no longer a planet of prey. It was a planet of warriors, and the future was theirs to shape.